Hello, microphone check. I hear myself for a second, as always. Make sure this thing's working. Hello, microphone check. Second, as always. All right, sounds good. Oh, I haven't done this in, what's it been, 2 weeks? Feel out of my element. But still in Skypark, as always. So this stream, I'm gonna do a couple of flights using the G1000 NXi as always, but I'm gonna use, we're gonna do VOR navigation with the G1000. I did this a few weeks ago with the Cessna 172, which has the Garmin 530 and 430. We did VOR navigation, and I know a few people asked for, they want an actual tutorial on this, but I'm gonna do a stream on it today, and then I'll be working on a tutorial, a more concise tutorial for it. And I actually haven't used VOR navigation in the G1000 myself a ton, so this will be fun. All right, so I'm gonna filter for some shorter flights so we don't get bored out of our minds here. I don't want to go to the East Coast. Looks like that's where my pilot's at anyway. Man, there's more grasshopper bush flights. I feel like I've done so many of them and I still haven't closed them all out. Yeah, there's even more. I think the thing is I need more than, we might need more than 100 miles if we're gonna do VOR nav, because yeah, I want to fly for a longer distance. Let's bump it to 200. And I also need to check these routes because certain areas don't have as many VOR stations as others. So it really matters what region we're flying in. Hey Norm, what's up? Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. I got my my cold brew. I'm ready to go. Sorry I haven't been on in a few weeks. I've honestly been distracted with another game a bunch of my friends are playing. This new MMO called New World, so we've all been playing that, and I've just got sucked in. So I very gonna feel really rusty flying today. Hey Marcos, thanks a lot, I appreciate that. All right, so yeah, we need to find something that's long enough distance so we can use a few VOR stations. So some of these smaller airports, like mattering the area we're flying in, there may be a lot of VORs or not very many. I know, like, since I'm in California, I'm used to flying around here in the sim, and there are a lot of stations in California. I know there are a lot in Florida. I think there are quite a bit in the Northeast as well. So we'll see how it goes. Hey Spyrox, how's it going? But I'm just gonna pick one randomly, and then we can take a look at the sectional map and see how many VORs are around us, just so we have enough to use as examples to fly around. Hey Chris, how's it going? So KVAY to CT29, this is, let's say South Jersey Regional. New Jersey up to Connecticut. So I'm gonna put these in Sky Vector, and then we'll see what kind of VOR stations are available in that area. Because if there's not enough, it's not going to be very interesting. If there's just like one, it'd be cool to play around with the cross radials and stuff like that. I mean, with the G1000 though, we get so much information that we don't get with something like the Cessna 152 that it's going to be very, very helpful for us. So it feels almost like cheating doing VOR navigation with a G1000, but we'll see how it goes. So KVAY to CT29er. Invalid airport. All right. Well, I guess that's not the one. So according to Sky Vector, Charlie Tango 29er is not an airport. I think sometimes the codes get changed and maybe they're just not in sync. So I'm not gonna do the, like, you normally I can figure it out. You can like zoom in, just look in the area, try to figure out which airport it actually is, but I'm just gonna choose a different one for the sake of time. Let's see what we got. Turn that music down a little bit. All right, what do we got here? All right, let's try this one. It's all in North Carolina. It crosses the border. I can't tell where it's going to. Is that Kentucky to North Carolina? KVJI. To 5W5. All right, there we go. So this would be our direct to route. So let's hunt for some VORs. So we have one right near our departure airport. Here's the Holston Vor right here. This big compass rose. So we have that one nearby. We have this one right north of us, Glade Spring VOR. I guess that's a VOR DME actually. And then, so along the way, what do we have? Here's one to the south. Looks like we're flying between a bunch of them. Can also switch over instead of world VFR in the top right, can choose world low airways. So then the VORs are simplified. So here we can see the two VORs here north and south of us. And it just cleans up the map a little bit. So if we want to, we can fly south and then hit up this Victor airway right here, Victor 310. Go eastbound on Victor 310. There's a few GPS waypoints we cross over on the way. And then here's 310 inbound over here to this. So this is Greensboro 116.2. That's another VORTAC it looks like. And then, okay, we have a bunch of VORs. This is actually a good one. Hey Toby, what's up? Have I tried Air Hauler 2? I actually own it and I briefly used it. Skypark Air Hauler 2 is more along the lines of NeoFly and On Air Company. Skypark is kind of unique in that it's just really simple. It's really fast to get going. You don't have to worry about like fuel and weight and balance and all that. You can pick any plane you want. It doesn't like actually load up your plane with the fuel you have in the career mode app, you know? So it's just less hardcore. I mostly use Skypark for the stream because it's really easy to just grab. I can use any plane and just grab a quick route and fly it. But off stream, I use On Air Company a lot. So I think, yeah, On Air Company, I think Air Hauler 2 is more like NeoFly as well. I barely used it. I used it for like a day just to get a little familiar with it. But yeah, they're all pretty similar to each other. But Skypark is, I would set Skypark apart from those three, just because it's much simpler. All right, so we got a bunch of VORs we can fly through here. Maybe 200 miles seems like kind of a lot, but we're going to get through several VORs. We can look at cross radial stuff if we want to when we go through this section. All right, so I'm just going to drag this pointer here to just do our flight plan, and then we'll see what actual radials we need to fly. You like the look of Skypark UI wise? Worried you would miss the detail stuff. Yeah, I think Skypark is good for like really casual, like a very casual career mode mod. Yeah, the UI is really nice. So I think for beginners, this is way less intimidating than something like NeoFly or On Air Company. So I think it's good for casual stuff. If you want a more hardcore experience and you want to like really dive in and treat it more realistically, yeah, I definitely think something like On Air Company or NeoFly Air Hauler are better. On Air sets itself apart with the virtual airline stuff. It has like different game modes, so you could be like the franchise guy, like, you know, I think almost like of like Football Manager, some of those games, you know, where you could just run the airline without even flying yourself in On Air Company. So that's pretty cool, like if you like that kind of thing. Or if you want to do a mix of flying for your own airline and managing AI, you know, like you hire pilots and computer controlled pilots and stuff and manage the fleet and everything. Like On Air Company is really cool for that, especially because you can do it through your web browser. You don't always have to use the app. So you could like, you know, take a break at work or whatever, if you're in an office, or, you know, before bed, open your laptop or your tablet and manage your airline company, you know. So that sets it apart for sure. And then you could do virtual airlines with friends too. Like you could start a virtual airline and all be flying for the same one, an on-air company. That's also something that makes it unique. All right, so I'll go back to the world VFR map for now. So here's the airport we're going to take off from. I'm going to go to Skypark and select this mission so I don't forget it. So we're going Kilo Victor Juliet India to 5 Whiskey 5. I'm just going to hit save and begin. Usually I'll forget to hit start on this, but I just use this to get a route for the stream pretty much. And then, so since we're going to use VORs, so we have two. We could use this one up here, you know, is obviously within range, is super close to us, but I'm going to use the Victor Airways. So here we can see this blue line, this teal line with 108 on it. So this is a Victor Airway leading from this VOR, the Holston Vor. I'm just going to say VOR, even though there are different types. Obviously, there's, you know, a VOR DME, and a VORTAC, but, you know, just in terms of a navigation aid, I'm just going to call it a VOR. So here, we're going to go to the Holston VOR. We're going to take Victor 108. Or sorry, this isn't called Victor 108. I had the airway, where is it? Victor 310. Outbound on the 108 radial right here. So I'm going to move this point until we follow that over to this intersection. If I go back to the world low map, it's just a lot easier to see it. So here we can see this waypoint here is actually a GPS waypoint, and that looks like it actually turns, the airway turns a little bit more towards the north to go over here to this VOR, Greensboro. I'm going to add that to my plan too, just so we can visualize what route we're going to fly. So you can see here, we're going to head outbound here on the 108 radial, 108, it says that right here. On the Victor 310, we'll follow this all the way to this intersection right here at Birch. So this is where the Victor 310 and the Victor 222 connect to each other. And at that point, we'll switch over to the next VOR and follow it inbound. So here it's got the 283. That's the outbound radial. So we'll dial that in, the reciprocal of that, which would be 103, right? 2 minus, so we have 28. So for the 2, I subtract 2, so we get 0. And then for the 8, I add 2, so 8 plus 2 is 10, so we get 103. So then we'll be on the 103 inbound radial, or the 103 radial inbound to the VOR here for Greensboro. And then from here, here's our destination over here, this little airport. It says Rally W 5W5. And we have this VOR right above it. And then over here to the west, there's another VOR here, the Liberty VOR. So if we're flying on the airways, what we could do is we could continue on the Victor Airways here to the east. We could fly on this one outbound. Kind of want to take a more of a drastic turn. We're going like pretty much straight east this whole time. So let's turn south towards this one. Let's go to like over the Liberty VOR instead, just so we actually make a turn during this flight. Hey Federal, what's up? I'm doing good. How you doing? Haven't been on for a few weeks, so feel like I'm just getting back into the swing of things. So then here, yeah, this one would be cool to do because we can do cross radial. So what we can do is we'll be flying outbound from the Liberty VOR right here. And we'll just have to estimate which radial we want to fly on. If I had paper and pen, I would draw the line. Here, SkyVector is estimating it for us right here. In little tiny text, it says 107. That is based on magnetic north, and each VOR has a variation to magnetic north, so it won't necessarily be exactly the 107 or 107 radial going outbound. It could be a few degrees off, or is most likely a few degrees off from that. But we can fly that outbound and then also use this VOR up here as a cross radial. We can figure out where we are while we're going along this. We can use this as a reference point to see where we are. So as we're flying along this segment of the flight plan, we can tune into this VOR and figure out which radial we're on at any moment. And then we'll kind of know where we are on this magenta line right here on this leg. It's kind of a long flight. Sweet, this will be cool. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, we're gonna take off here from KVJI. This is Virginia Highlands. So we're gonna take off from here, and we're not gonna fly directly to this VOR. We're just gonna fly to this course right here. So we'll fly southeast from our departure airport to the southeast until we intercept this second line, not this first one. This is just for a reference. We'll intercept this second magenta line right here. And we'll take that down here until we get to this intersection at Birch. We'll switch over there until we get to this VOR over here, which is Greensboro. And then just to make it fun, we're gonna make this right-hand turn here. Just to actually get a decent turn here and here. Not even on VATSIM do they get close to this much detail. Oh, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I haven't checked the altitudes yet, so we can do that next on the VFR map. Yeah, this one's just, it's a lot easier to look at the VORs on the world low map here. You can get to that in the top right corner. It's really small for you guys probably, but way up in the top right corner, there are these buttons. So I'm switching from world VFR to world low airways, and you can still see, you can see these simplified VOR icons, these symbols here. But if we want to check our obstacles and stuff like that, we'll do that on the VFR map. So let me zoom back in. So here we can look for all of the obstacle information or the elevation information. And this stuff's all over the place. Pretty much everywhere you look, there's elevation information on the sectional. So if we're going to fly from here to the southeast, we can already see these numbers. Whenever you see these 4-digit numbers, you're looking, for the most part, I think you're looking at an obstacle altitude or an obstacle elevation. So here you have towers or other obstacles that are at 3,200 feet here. Some of these little dots here, these little points also show elevation information. Here's 3,800. And then these really large blue numbers are kind of like an area obstacle number. So in this kind of whole section here, our highest obstacle will be at 6,300 feet. So over here towards the east, you can see 5,100. As you keep going east, 3,700. So it's flattening out over here, 3,200. So we can use those to get a good idea of what altitude we're going to need to fly at to be above these obstacles and get a clearance of like 1,000 feet plus above each one of these. So this is how we can pick our cruising altitude. So we're going to fly, we're going to take off here and we're going to climb. Let's see, this airport. Just around here, you can see all the highest obstacles are 2,500 feet or so. If I click here and then click on the airport name, that'll let me look at it in a new tab. Airport elevation is 2,087 feet. Let's call it 2,100 feet. So we have to climb, 500 feet or so when we take off to get above these obstacles, which is normal. We're going to climb 1,000 feet right away as usual. So then we're going to fly to the southeast, and here we can see some of the obstacles, 3,200 feet, 3,000 feet, but we have this big one over here, 6,300 feet in this whole area. I could hunt around, try to find exactly which tower or mountain or piece of terrain is that high. Like down here, there's 5,960 at this point. But it's easy just to look at this big number and base it off that. So what I'm going to do is just base it off this. So we're flying eastbound, and the biggest number I can see along the way here is 6,300. It gets lower and lower as we get to our destination. 2,800, 2,200, 2,500. And then the airport elevation over here of 5W5 is only 244 feet. So we're going from 2,100 feet down to 240 feet for our departure and arrival airports. So yeah, along the way, once we climb, like this is the highest terrain area is our departure area. So 6,300 feet, we're flying eastbound and we're going to fly VFR. So if you're flying eastbound, I just think east is odd. So we want an odd number in the thousands of feet. And we also want 1,000 feet obstacle clearance above this number. So first of all, 6,300, we add 1,000, we get 7,300. So that gives us 1,000 feet above it, right? And we're heading eastbound, so we want to be at an odd number of feet. So 7,300, the 7 is odd. Eastbound, odd. East is odd. So 7,300 is fine. We're going to be going eastbound at the 7,000s in feet. And then for VFR, you need to be at a 500 increment. So we'll just add that, bump that up to 7,500. So that'd be our VFR cruise for this. To avoid the obstacles, we need to be above 7,300. Since we're going eastbound, we want to have an odd number. East is odd number in thousands of feet. 7 is odd, so we're already there at 7,300. And then we just bump it up to 7,500 because you want a 500 on the end of your VFR altitude for traffic separation. So IFR, we would be at an even number or a 000 on the end of our thousands of feet. But VFR, you tack on 500 for separation. Do you check the winds aloft? Oh, hey, Merlin, what's up? What plane? I haven't actually decided yet. I should look at the runways to figure it out. I usually fly, the 172. Maybe I'll fly the Diamond today. I need to fly something with the G1000 because that's where we're going to do the VOR navigation in. 1,000 feet buffer, 2,000 feet buffer for the mountain. Are you saying we should do a 2,000 foot buffer, Dexter, instead of 1,000? I thought it was 1,000 feet. So if it's 2,000 and we're at 75, then our next altitude that we would use is 9,500 going eastbound instead of 7,500. Do you check winds aloft or is it not simulated? I usually don't because I'm lazy, but I definitely could. I know, you real pilots out there do that. I could check windy. Yeah, I could check winds aloft. I know SimBrief gives you the winds aloft as well. So that's definitely something we could check as well. G58. I actually haven't flown the Beechcrafts at all. Just because I don't know the procedures at all in those. Not that I know the other ones extremely well, but I'm definitely more comfortable in the Cessna and the Grand Caravan, the 172, the Diamond, the SR22. Yeah, could be good to go faster. Yeah, or we could do the DA62 or something as well. I can also do, we can do sim rate increase. Skypark is really forgiving. Like you can choose any plane you want. You can instantly teleport to any area of the world you want for a fee. And you can also use sim rate increase. So we can do fast forwarding to make it faster. But I definitely wanted a long enough route for us to have several VORs to use. If we go too short, then I was worried, we'll just have one VOR. It'd be kind of boring. All right, here's the VOR. Put in the outbound leg, use DME. All right, we're 25 miles. The airport should be near us. Oh, there it is. So trying to pick something a little bit longer. So I'm going to load in at least KVJI for the departure airport. Load in at parking. And then I'll put in the destination just so we see the distance. It'll be listed here though. 191 miles, 1 hour, 47 minutes. Now is that based off, I haven't added, oh, here's our speed. Yeah, it's based off 110 knots for the cruise speed at 8,000 feet. That's just the default here in SkyVector. I didn't even look through the rest, did I? So yeah, once we get over here, yeah, this is that other VOR I chose. Greensboro will make a turn more towards the south and then use the Liberty VOR right here. Go east from there. And then we could, what I could do, I guess this is more direct to the airport. What we could also do is fly up to this VOR instead. Fly in the Victor 194 right here. Up to the Raleigh. Is this the Raleigh VOR? Yeah, Raleigh 122.2. Let me look at the other map here. Raleigh Durham. Oh, sorry, it's 117.2 for this one, this VORTAC. Yeah, and then we could fly southbound from there. We'd be closer, so it'd be more accurate, you know, we want to be closer to the VOR. So the further we get, the less sensitive our needle and our instruments are. So this would be more accurate to go here and then go on. What is that? That's 1.8, so 1.7, 169 it looks like. Maybe the 169 radial outbound based on the compass rose right here to get over to this airport, 5W5. And then the distance is much shorter too, only 16 nautical miles. I mean, this seems like a safer option than going southeast, like kind of out of our way more. Yeah, this is pretty long. We'll see. We'll use the sim increase in speed. All right, so I'm gonna load in. What should we fly? Let me check the runways. What's nice about Skypark is they give you the runway information right here. So when you choose one of these missions, it's really convenient to go to this little to-do list. Then if you click the airport photo, it'll expand it. You can see the runway info. So our arrival, 3,000 foot. So we have asphalt, hard surface runway, 3,000 feet. And then departing, we have 4,500 feet. And it also tells us the type of plane to fly here. It says that we could do a turboprop as well. We could do a piston or a turboprop. So I could do we could do the Grand Caravan, so we're a little bit faster. I just want something that has a G1000 in it as well. All right, so I'm gonna load in here. Live weather, all multiplayer, and I think I have live traffic turned on too. The 63 is the maximum for that quad with 1,000 built in for the highest obstacle. Oh, I see what you're saying, Dexter. Got you. Got it. So what Dexter's saying is, so what I'm misunderstanding is this number is already compensated to be 1,000 feet higher than the obstacle. That's what you're saying, Dexter? But here I see like this 5594 right next to this 6,300 is not 1,000 feet buffer though. So I wonder why that is. For the quad. So yeah, this whole, where is the left bound here? Just for here. I can see the quadrant right here, these black lines. Which server? Cash, I'm on the US West server. And we're loading in at, I already forgot the airport code. KVJI, Kilo Victor Juliet India on US West. That's cool, Dexter. I'm going to read about that afterwards. Now I'm curious like why these two numbers aren't 1,000 apart from each other. Like I would expect this 6-3 to be a 6-5 if there's a 5-5 right next to it, you know? I'm sure there's obviously there's a reason, right? This isn't a mistake or anything, but I'm just curious. So that's good to know. So I wouldn't need to add 1,000 to this to get my cruising altitude. I could just look at this number. So if we were flying eastbound through this quadrant, I could just take this 63. Or sorry, if we're going westbound through this quadrant, we could just take the 63, bump it up to 6,500 for our VFR altitude, and fly at 65 westbound or 75. We're going to do 75 for ours for eastbound. What was the tablet and is it payware? This is Skypark. It is payware. It's for PC. It's on the Orbex site and Orbex and their suite of products. But it's the career mode mod that I'm using for this stream. So if you've ever heard of like NeoFly or On Air or FS Economy or Air Hauler, it's basically a very simple one of those. It just has a really nice UI It's just for Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it's a good starter career mode, and it'll just give you cool routes to fly. Like, it's really nice to find routes here with Skypark. I think it's really fast, so I use it for the stream. Off the stream, I use On Air Company because it's a bit more hardcore. But this one's much more forgiving. You can pick any plane you want whenever. You don't need to manage your fuel or your weight and balance or anything like that. You can just fly with whatever. You can use sim acceleration, all that stuff. Yeah, it's just more casual, but at the same time, that makes it really fast to hop into and just get flying. So it's like $35 US, I think, is what I paid for it through Orbex. All right, so let's get this started. I'm going to use the quick engine start to save time. So I'm hitting Control E. That'll start our engines up for us. You're the pilot instead of the company owner. Yeah, you work for companies, use their aircraft. Yeah, that's right, Murdoch. Yeah, some of the other ones, like On Air Company especially, you have the option of basically building your own airline and having like virtual pilots fly for you and fly your own. And yeah, when you fly, like, you can't use sim acceleration. It'll set the weight, it'll set the fuel. You have to buy fuel. You have to do check rides, all of that. So yeah, it'll give you solid obstruction clearance. All right, Tech. All right, I got it. I'll read more about it later because I thought I didn't realize that already built in the clearance. So that's awesome to know. Thanks for teaching me. Appreciate it. So going eastbound, yeah, all we really need to do is if we look at these numbers for each quadrant, we have 63, 51. It only goes down from there. So we'll know that if we're doing a 7,500, we're doing a cruise at 7,500, we'll be clear through our highest obstacles. Yeah, so if we were going westbound, we could do 6,500 instead of 75. Even for westbound and odd for eastbound. All right, so this is started up. Let me turn our prop. Prop is going nuts. Let's make sure my controls are good here. All right, and let's program in our first VOR. So I'm using the G1000 NXi like I normally do. And it's in the marketplace if you guys haven't used it. If you're using the stock G1000, all this stuff will work for you as well, because the stock G1000 will work the same way. You can input your VORs with the nav radios up here. So these are our two nav radios, 1 and 2. And you'll just do it the same way. It'll just look slightly different for you if you're using the stock G1000. And then normally I'm using GPS, but now we're going to use VOR 1 and 2, or our nav radio 1 and 2. So the CDI button down here lets us choose between those navigation sources. So we can choose between GPS, which we're not going to use. And then we can choose between, this says localizer 1, but this will be a VOR. And then localizer 2, VOR 2, nav 2 radio. So we can use those. And then what we can also do is turn on bearings for Nav 1 and Nav 2. And this will kind of work, you know, like a non-directional beacon if you've used those, where it'll just point towards where the VOR is. So we'll turn that on once we're up as well. So it's kind of nice. I feel like the G1000 is like cheating with VORs, but some people wanted to see this, so I figured I'd give it a shot before I make a proper tutorial for it. All right, so back here on our map, we're going to look at the first VOR. So the first one we're using is this one, the Holston VOR, or Holston Vor. And the frequency right there is 114.6. So we're going to tune into 114.6. All right, so right here, we're going to do 114.6. We use these two knobs on the nav knob right here, the inner and outer, to change the number. So the outer knob changes the larger or the integer part of the number. So there's 114, and the inner knob changes the decimal part or the smaller number. So 114.6. And then to swap it, to make it active, we hit this little swap button right here. And then it gives us an identifier code. So right here, HMV, Hotel Mike Victor. That's our identifier code for the station. And if we go back here, we can see right there, Hotel Mike Victor written out. And these little dots to the right, if you're not familiar with VORs, this is the Morse code pattern. So the series of dots and dashes, we can listen to these to identify that station. What the G1000 does and other Garmin and other avionics is they actually decode the audible Morse code and turn it into the letters. So the Morse code is spelling HMV. So that's H, M, and then V on those 3 lines, and it's spelling it out. So that's how we know we're tuned into the correct VOR, or in this case, VORTAC. So if we want to actually listen to that ourselves, we can do that by using the audio panel in the middle. If I just turn on Nav One, that's where we are tuned into the VOR. You can hit this, and then we'll hear the Morse code. So if you don't have the decoding that's happening, where the Garmin's decoding it and showing us the letter equivalent, it's decoding it to HMV for us, you can listen in like this. Then you can look at these dots and dashes for the pattern. So that matches. 3 shorts, 2 longs, 3 shorts, and 1 long. So we're good there. So then I can just turn that off. This is also useful if you want to know when you're in range of a VOR. So what we can do is, and what we will do is, we'll tune in our second VOR that we're going to. And what you could do is just leave the Nav 2 turned on here for the audio. And then that'll be another cue that we're in range of the next VOR. We'll hear the Morse code come through just randomly during our flight. So in case we don't notice that it's come up on the G1000 and it's in range, we'll hear that. So that's a way for us to know that we're in range of the next VOR when we get to it. So what I can do is go up and set up our second one. And you move down to the next field here for Nav 2 by pushing this in. You can see right here it says push 1-2. So that's telling us if we push the small knob, then it'll switch the cursor here down from Nav 1 down to Nav 2. So we do that. It matters what control setup you're using, but for me, I hold down the left mouse button and then I hit the right mouse button to push the knob. And that's kind of the newer Microsoft Flight Sim control style. If you have the old one, you'll just point at it and left click. And then if you're on Xbox, you'll do something similar. You'll point at this, I believe you like left trigger and then right trigger to push the knob. So then here we can put in the second VOR. So the first one here we're using is Holston. And if we follow our path here, once we get around here, we're actually going to switch to the other VOR. And that one's right here, which is Greensboro 116.2. So we're going to put in 116.2. And you can also use your mouse wheel anytime you point to one of these knobs. Is much easier than clicking, or in this case, for this control type, I click and drag to change it. You can always point at it and use your mouse wheel. So we're going to go 116.2. And that one's already in range, so we have the identifier for that one too. And if I had Nav 2 on, we would have heard that already. We don't hear it. Oh, that's weird. All right, I'm going to leave that on for now so we hear it once we get closer, but either we're not in range or like it seems like we're not in range. We don't hear it, so yeah. Maybe this GSO is just here because it's in the database of the Garmin. So it just knows. I don't know, that might actually be a bug. I don't expect it to show that because we can't hear it. And if I turn on the Nav 2 bearing down here, you can see it has no information on it. As opposed to bearing 1, which is Nav 1, that's in range, so we get the information. This one's a VORTAC, so it has DME, or it has distance information, so we know how many miles we're away from it. Nav 2, you can see there's no information. So I think this might actually be a bug, where it's showing GSO right here when we're not in range. So that's interesting. Many more VORs have the same frequency. Exactly, yeah. So that's why it's important to identify, is to make sure that you're picking up the correct one. But yeah, let's double check the VOR. Yeah, GSO is the identifier for this one. So it does have GSO here, but it looks like we're out of range. So this could just be a bug with the NXi or with the sim where it's showing this even though we're not in range of it. I wouldn't expect it to show this. I'll have to read the manual later. I wouldn't expect it to show this until we're actually within range. But we will leave Nav 2 turned on here on the audio panel, so we'll hear the Morse code beeps once we get closer. All right, so we have Nav 1 is set to our first VOR. And go back over to this. So we're here at this airport right here. KVJI, the Virginia Highlands Airport. And then we're going to use this VORTAC right here, the Holston Vor as our first navigation aid to go eastbound right here on the Victor the Victor 310. You can see here it has 108 written. So that's our outbound radial. So we're going to fly outbound on the 108 from the Holston VORTAC. So all we need to do is dial in 108. So the easiest way to think of VOR navigation is just think about the course you're flying. Like, which direction are we flying? Well, we're flying eastbound. So we're going to dial in the 108. This is the airway and the radial will be on. All radials are outbound from the VOR. The dog is scratching at the door. Hold on one second. Hi, buddy. All right, the dog is in the room now. He's very happy. Okay, so yeah, so 108. So the easiest way is just to think about which course you're flying. So if we were coming from the west side of the VOR, we would still think about which course do we want to fly in relation to the VOR, and that's the radial that we're flying outbound on. So if we're over here for some reason, say we're way over here to the west, and our goal is still to fly to the VOR, we would say, what course do we want to fly to the VOR? And then, you know, that's the direction we would fly. We'd fly, say, 090 in this case, directly east to it. And then that's what we dial in is technically a radial in terms of the VOR, but really what we care about is just which course, which direction are we flying? And then there is a trick, you know, I went over this in the one VOR video I have, but if you're flying inbound to a VOR, then the radial you're on is technically the reciprocal radial of the one you're on. So you would be the one that's on the opposite side, since all radials extend outbound from the VOR, if that makes sense. So anyway, we'll get into that when we go a little more when we go towards the next VOR. But for now, we know that we want to take off and get on this Victor airway right here, which is the Victor 310, this blue line. And right here, it shows 108 is drawn in. That's our radial to fly along that Victor airway from this VOR. So we're going to fly outbound on the 108 radial from the Holston VORTAC, or VOR for short. Just call them all VORs generically. Anyway, so all we have to do is dial in our desired course, our desired radial, and that is 108. So we're going to dial that in here using the course knob right up here in the top right. So I'm on GPS mode right now. So to unlock this and let us actually choose our radial, we just need to switch our CDI or our navigation source to use VOR 1, or in this case, Nav One. So when I hit CDI, now it says VOR 1. And then the course right here dialed in is 360. So now this is kind of like using OBS mode with GPS. You can override which course. And in this case with the VOR, we always define the course. So we're just going to roll this and pick our outbound radial. So we're going to pick the course we want to fly, 108. Just use this triangular knob over here to do that. All right, so that matches here. So we've said that from the Holston VORTAC, we want to fly on we want to fly a course of 108 basically. So we could be to the west of it. Like we could be way up here right now, and our goal is still the same. Our goal is to fly on this blue line. So if we were over here and we dialed in this same thing, we would still dial in 108 because this is the heading. This is the course. No, I say heading without wind, right? Our course or our track. We want to fly this outbound 108 from the VOR. So no matter where we are, if we dial in this 108, it's going to show us how to get to this blue line here that's extending from the VOR to the east. So we happen to be taking off from this airport that's to the north. So obviously we're going to have to fly towards the south to get to that blue line, to that course or to that radial. All right, so we have 108 dialed in, and then the to from flag. This is something on the G1000 that's, I think it's hard to see like some other things on the G1000, especially when we have this text over it here. There's a little flag right here, actually. This is the to from flag. It'll be either on this side of the green line right here. You can see it's kind of overlapping where VOR 1, where that label is, or it'll be affixed to this side of it right here. So when it's on the side with the arrow, that's the course we've dialed in, then that indicates a to flag. And when it's on the opposite side right here, that's indicating the from flag. So what that means is if we fly a course of 108, then we'll be flying away from, we'll be flying from the VOR. So we'll get going on that. And then what we can do as well is, like you can do with any VOR, when any instrument, CDI or an HSI, we can figure out which radial we're on right now. So this is something that is kind of a basic exercise with using VORs is someone may say, tell me which radial we're on right now. Which radial of the Holston VOR are we on right now? So we're on the airport, we're at the airport on the ground right now. But this magenta line right here is basically the radial that we happen to be on at this moment. We can figure that out just by turning this course knob. And what we want to do is turn it until the needle is in the middle and until we have a from flag. So how this looks on this is the from flag right here. So if it's on the side away from the course side, so this is pointing at 053, this big arrow. This small inside arrow is the to from flag. If it's on the same side as the big arrow, that's 2, right? They're both pointing towards that course. It's like that's how you get to the VOR. And then this one is a from flag if it's on the opposite side. So what we can do is just turn this until we have a from flag and until the needle gets centered, the needle being this offset green line right here. That's telling us if we're on that course or not. So as we turn this, we're going to turn it until we are on the course. So there, the needle's centered. So that's exactly where we are, is we're on the 021 roughly radial. So we have a from flag right here. And then that works because if you just look at this, so where is a course of 021 from the VOR? Well, if we're in the middle of the VOR and we fly a heading, with no wind, or a course of 021, we're going to fly almost northbound, right? So that's exactly where we are. This is the 021 radial. And that's not based off what magnetic north actually is. It's based off of what the VOR says magnetic north is. So there can be a variation between what the VOR says is 021 and what true 021 magnetic direction is, because there's a variation. Like when they install the VOR, they set it up, they point it to magnetic north at that time. It could be set inaccurately, or it hasn't been upgraded for decades or recalibrated for decades. So there is a slight variation. That's why if you fly using GPS on a specific course from a VOR, you may not actually be on that radial. You may be a few degrees off the actual VOR radial, if that makes sense. So anyway, this is how you figure out what radial you're on at any moment. And this is weird for me to look at just because I don't really use the G1000 for VOR navigation. This format of this like digital HSI takes some getting used to. I'm not used to it. I'll probably mess up during the flight and be confused about where the flag is. But this is what it looks like when we've centered the needle. So what we're saying here is that right now we're on the 021 radial. So we have the from flag right here. If we twisted it all the way around, you can see the flag changes. So now the flag is on the to side, right? If the two arrows are together, then that's a to flag. So this is the to flag. The from flag would be on the opposite side, away from the big arrow, or the big arrowhead. So if you turn this all the way around like this would be wrong if you're trying to find out which radial we're on. This is 201. Obviously, we're not on the 201 radial. That would be down here near where it says there's 210. So you can read 18, 19, 2, and then 210. So the 210 would be like right here. So yeah, we're obviously not south of the VOR. We're north of the VOR. So this is the to flag. So that would be incorrect for finding where we are. You have to keep turning it until you have the needle centered with the from flag. There's the from flag. Keep turning it until it's centered. And of course, we'll get back down around to 021. So that's mostly centered. It's only a 1 degree of precision. So it's somewhere in between those two. So we're around that 021. All right, spent a lot of time on that. So let's go ahead and switch back to the 108. So that's the course we want to fly outbound from the radial, from the VOR. We want to fly in the 108 radial, or outbound. So we're going to dial in 108 again. And we'll finally fly. All right, 108, VOR 1. All right, so we're good. Let me see if I remember how to taxi. I haven't flown in a couple weeks. Do I want to use this? Okay, it's untowered, so we're just going to announce our taxi. That is a pretty dead-looking windsock. So I'll just go with what it says in the ATC window here, runway 6, so we'll use runway 6. So runway 6, I'm just going to put my bug on the 6, so we know we need to go to the left. So we need to go to the runway that faces a heading of 060 roughly. All right, let's finally go. That was a lot of talking. Hopefully that stuff made sense if anybody's new to VORs. Man, I haven't flown. It's so weird. Not you do something regularly, like every day, every other day, and then you stop doing it for a few weeks. I feel like a total newbie. We're way too close to. All these planes are way too close. I'm just gonna go over here. All right, so we're flying the Grand Caravan, and I'm using the G1000 NXi mod, but you can use the stock G1000 mod, or you know, you can use the anything that has a CDI and a navigation radio. Is that the Baron? I haven't flown the Baron. I know the Baron has a... Wait, does the Baron have a G1000 in it? It does, right? Yeah, the Baron has a G1000. The Bonanza has a G1000. It's the... I think it's the King Air that does not. I think the King Air has some weird, like, G3X mod that I think people say is really unrealistic for the Baron. Or for the King Air, but... All right, general options. I'm just going to turn on multiplayer so we can see who's behind us. Or turn on the nameplates here. It's Zhao Goku in front of us. King Air has the Garmin 3000. I thought it was the... I thought the King Air had like a G3X or something on it. Is this stuttering me or YouTube? Oh, is there stuttering? Let me take a look. I have my stream on in another browser. Looks okay to me. I'm not sure, David. It looks okay to me. I'm not sure. Someone else in the chat can verify. If it is me, I can see if there's something I can do about it. But YouTube has like a stream health thing, and it's not yelling at me, so I think it's probably fine. It says stream is healthy. The G5000? The King Air does? I thought only the Longitude had the G5000. I'll have to check out the King Air again. I thought the King Air had like a G3X Touch or something like that. Like, that break, a little bit of a tail strike there. Seems fine. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Good for you guys. Okay, cool. Thanks. All right, I haven't flown this thing in so long. What's our rotation speed? 70. VY is 95. All right. Fuel conditions at max. Rotate is 70. VY is 95. Wish I had one of those fancy checklist boxes like the missionary bush pilot guy does. There's 60, 70. $99, pitching up for 95. Trying to stay coordinated here. All right, we're at 500 feet. Actually, I didn't do the full checklist, so we just took off with no flaps. I just used the quick start with the Command E or Control E shortcut. So that doesn't configure the entire plane, it just starts the engine. So actually our lights are off and everything, so fail on my part. Let's turn our lights on. And 21 degrees Celsius, so we don't have pitot heat on. All right, so I'm gonna set our altitude bug here up for our cruise. We said 7,500 feet. Let's do that with the Bravo. Just for a reminder for 7,500. There we go. Okay, so now that we took off, so we have our VOR course is in. So right here you can see the line, you know, the deviation off course is deflected towards the south side. So generally the thing you do is fly to be parallel to the course you want to fly. So the first thing we're going to do is make a right-hand turn to 108. So we turn to fly parallel first, and then the second step is to turn to intercept the course that we want to be on. All right, so we can hear the Morse code coming in already. So we had Nav 2 turned on, so we can hear that we're in range already of that second VOR. So I'm gonna turn Nav 2 off. We're at 4,800 feet. Wasn't putting in any rudder there. There we go. Oh yeah, I didn't start the mission. Of course I didn't. I always get distracted and just never start it. I'll just have a zero balance in Skypark because I never start the missions. All right, so I'm gonna turn on the autopilot really quick so I can zoom in and not worry about turning off course. All right, so here we are at, we're flying roughly 108. I'm at 112. So now that we're flying parallel to our course, you know, our course is 108, we're flying 113, so we're flying parallel to that line. So right now we're somewhere up here in this area, like right here or so. So we're flying this direction parallel to the line we want to be on, which is down here. So all we have to do now is turn to the right or turn towards the south to go intercept that Victor airway right there that we want to be on. And that's what that green line right there represents. That's the course we want to be on. So if you're used to seeing magenta lines because you're using GPS, when you're using VORs, it's indicated by green instead of magenta. All right, we're actually coming up to our 7,500. So if I want to use autopilot, which I kind of always do and am lazy, I can just switch to heading mode. You can use nav mode. I'm just going to switch to heading mode for now. And what we're going to do is turn to intercept that line. So the acronym I looked up a while back was TIT-PIT, which is so TIT-PIT. So that's the steps to use a VOR basically for navigation. So TIT, the first three letters are, so the first three letters, T being the first one is to tune into the VOR. So we did that. I is identify. So we did that when we were on the ground. We identified it with Morse code. We identified it with the letters right here, the letter identifier. And then the third T is to twist the OBS knob. So we've done that. Our OBS knob is this course knob right here for the G1000. So we dialed in which course we want to be on. In this case, it's the 108 radial outbound from the VOR. So that's the TIT part. And then the PIT part, PIT, P is parallel. So we did that already. That's where you parallel the course. So we flew 108 to match the course we want to fly. So we're flying parallel to the course we want to be on. And then PIT, P-I-T, the second I is intercept. So now we're turning to intercept that course. So we're turning towards the course, which is towards the south here, to intercept that line. And then the last T for PIT is track. So then we'll track and just stay on that course. So TIT, PIT. That's one I looked up like a while back, and I think it's pretty funny and it's easy to remember. So tune, identify, TIT, so tune, yeah, identify, and then twist the knob, and then go parallel. I is intercept, and then track. All right, and autopilot's holding us at 7,500. So now we're still turning towards the course here to get closer to it. And what we can see, because this one has DME information, we see that we're 18.6 miles from the station itself. And then let me go to down here to the options again and turn off bearing 1 just to clean it up. So then here, when we turn on a bearing, this basically works the same way that using ADF does. ADF and NDB, so if you've ever used an NDB, this is all you get is an arrow that points to where the beacon is. So here, when you turn on a bearing for a VOR station, it does the same thing. It's pointing to where the station is. So it's showing that it's going to be behind us basically once we get on course, which is true because we're flying away from it. If we wanted to fly directly to the station right now, we could just turn to where this arrow is pointing. This teal arrow is pointing near 240. That could go. That would take us directly to the station. We could just follow that right to the VOR station, and that would be a direct to route, right, from our current location directly to the VOR, not defining which course we're flying on, which radial we're flying on. But usually, you know, using VORs to navigate, you define which radial you're flying in or outbound on. So for us, we're going to fly outbound on the 108. And that's right here. That happens to be the Victor 310. So we're probably right around here somewhere. Who knows? We're just flying towards this course. So we're flying this direction to intercept the Victor airway right here, Victor 310. And then once we're on that and we have 108 dialed in, we'll be tracking that. So we'll be on this blue line, taking this all the way down here to this intersection where it actually changes course a little bit. It turns left a few degrees. And over there, we'll switch over to use the next VOR, and we'll go inbound to the Greensboro VOR. So I'm going to turn us a little more towards the course. We're probably approaching it at like a 30 degrees instead of like 45 or so. So I'm going to turn us in so we get to the course faster. Yeah, Merlin, I don't think I can start it because I'm away from the airport. It's definitely too late now, but I think it requires you to be on the ground when you start it, so no money for me. And we can see that we're going south a little bit, southeast of the airport. So again, taking us down towards this Victor airway that we want to get to, down towards the 108 radial. And then we can also, you know, because we have the power of the G1000, we can use the map. We could turn on just the VORs. Here's the VOR that we're actually using, HMV, so you can see the VOR right there. I didn't put in the GPS flight plan, but if we did, we could use that as a reference. I'm trying not to have the whole thing shown to us. But yeah, we could see the whole GPS flight plan. We could just put in the same route that I put in at SkyVector if we wanted to, for a visual reference, but I did not do that. So we're getting closer to the course. It stays off until we're within, how many degrees is this? Is it 5 degrees? This won't start coming in until we're relatively close to the course. So we'll keep our eye on that. You should modify Skypark to inform you didn't start the mission. Yeah, On Air Company is pretty nice with that. If you basically load up and you're on the runway, it'll automatically start tracking as soon as you take off, which is really nice. Or it's even on your takeoff roll, I think it'll start tracking. Yeah, I need that because as you guys that have watched before, I always forget to start the mission. So. All right, so we're flying towards our course still. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on bearing number 2, if it'll give me my mouse cursor. Bearing number 2 to Nav 2. So GSO, it's 87 miles away for the next one. I'll use sim acceleration once we get on course here to save us all some time, but yeah, since we're in range of the other VOR as well. That's the one we tuned in on Navigation Radio 2 right here. We can see that DME info as well for the next VOR, which is this one, Greensboro. So Greensboro is also a VORTAC. So there are 3 types of VORs. There's a VOR, which does not give you distance information. So if it was just a plain old VOR, we wouldn't get this reading of our distance from the VOR. And then the second one, VOR DME, is a VOR with DME, or distance measuring equipment. So we would get the capability to see how far we are from it, which is really, really useful. And a VORTAC has the same capability. A VORTAC is a combination between, it's basically a VOR and a TACAN, which is like a military navigation aid. But for civilian use, you still can use those, and you get basically the same capability as a VOR DME. You get the direction, and you also get the distance information. But if you do tune into just a plain old VOR, you will not get this distance information here. All right, so the needle's coming in, so we're going to turn to track that now. So I'm just using autopilot to do it. You guys that are hardcore and really good at hand flying can do this by hand. I've done it by hand. It's a lot of work, especially when you're talking and moving the camera all at the same time. So it's definitely very challenging to do that. If you're an autopilot fiend like me, you can go ahead and just switch to Nav Mode, and it'll fly to the course and then track the course automatically for you. I was just using the heading mode to show the steps to fly to intercept the course. But if you use autopilot, so right now we're on VOR 1, we have the course dialed in. This is kind of like if you've ever used OBS mode with GPS. It's the same thing. We're defining the exact course or radial, in this case because it's a VOR, that we're flying to or from the VOR on, and the autopilot still has the capability to follow that once we define it. So now it's turning us automatically to be on that radial. So 108 radial outbound on that VOR. And then here you'll get now, instead of GPS, which you might be familiar with, showing here when you're doing a GPS flight plan with autopilot, we have VOR. So we're following a VOR. And what's really nice is, since wind is going to blow you on and off course, the same benefit applies to using autopilot with a VOR. It's going to keep making those corrections for us with the wind. You can see we have a crosswind here, 9 knots out of the north, so it's going to be pushing us towards the right or towards the south a little bit. So it'll compensate for that for us automatically. So if we flew this by hand, though, something that's really nice on the G1000 is there's a little, this little diamond right here shows, I think it's a 6-second prediction of what your heading is based on the wind. So we could turn left a little bit to compensate for that, to bring the diamond towards the middle. You can see the autopilot's pulling it towards the middle. It's very tiny. And there's also a vertical one of these as well. So you can see right here, this little tiny line. It shows like I believe it's 6-second prediction, or is it 10, of the trend basically. So this is showing our airspeed trend. So if I pull our throttle right now, that line will go down to show us where it's predicting our resulting airspeed will be. I'm gonna go ahead and bring it back up. And then this is kind of the same thing, but for our lateral, our deviation on our heading right here, it's showing where the wind is like pushing us. So we'll actually be a little to the right as the wind's pushing us that direction. So you can see the autopilot moving to the left. The GPS ground track, yeah, that's definitely a better way of saying it, yeah. Yeah, so right now you can see that it's to the right just because of our wind, of the wind pushing us from the left. All right, so we're pretty far. We're on course now, so 31.1 nautical miles from was it Henderson? Sorry, we're going to the Greensboro VOR. Sorry, the Holston VOR. So we're we're exactly 31.7 nautical miles away from this, on our way to the other VOR. And then once we get over here, we'll want to switch over to be inbound. And I did check for a crossover point and I couldn't see one. So when you're on the Victor Airways, there'll be a little point shown to tell you when to switch over to the other VOR. But if one isn't shown, you just switch over when you're halfway. So I'm trying to find one here. Where is one of them? They're right along the airways. Oh, right here. So this is a little crossover point. It's probably hard to see, but it's like a little, it's just an angle. Like, I don't know how to describe this shape. It's like 2 L's. So this is a crossover point. So it shows you where or what distance to switch over to the next navigation aid. So in this case, it's showing us when we leave outbound here from the Columbia VOR, we're going north. When we're 26 miles out, from that one, or 54 miles away from the one we're heading to, which is this one up here, Charlotte, this is the point that we would switch over to the other VOR and track that VOR instead. But if it's not published, then I believe it's a halfway. You just roughly halfway through on the Victor Airways where you'll switch over to then use the destination VOR that you're headed towards. So in this case, we're not halfway yet. So we're 36 and then 70. So what I can do is just accelerate our time. This is going to mess up Zhao Goku here. I forget who said what your name was in the YouTube chat. But if we accelerate here, then we're going to pass you. So fair warning. So I'll do that just so we don't have to wait forever. So I'm just going to accelerate 2 times here. See ya. So we're going at, what, 4x speed right now? So we're just going to do this so we can save a ton of time. We would avoid these clouds if we're flying VFR for real. And there's actually a cloud layer coming up there. So realistically, we would avoid getting too close to these. But we're just going to continue on just so we can stay focused. So we'll wait until we're halfway. So because we have DME on both of them, it's really easy. When these numbers match, we'll know we're halfway. So we'll just wait for that, and then we'll switch over to the other one, to our destination VOR, which is that Greensboro one. So we can go back to the flight plan here. So we're along this leg right here, going to this VOR over here. And then what we can see is the Victor Airway here, 283. That's the radial outbound for that Victor Airway. So if we're flying away from this VOR, from the Greensboro VOR on the Victor 310, we would use the 283 as our outbound. I just witnessed a caravan going into warp. Okay, we're almost at halfway, so you can see the numbers getting closer and closer. All right, so I'm going to slow down now. 2x. All right, now we're at 1x. All right, so we're halfway now. So we're 53.5 miles from both of them. So now we're at the halfway mark. So what we're going to do is switch over. So the first thing I'm going to do, because we have autopilot, again, I know I said we're flying VFR. We would avoid these clouds if we're flying VFR. Just too lazy to put in an IFR flight plan, and we're just using VORs. So anyway, so right now we'll switch over to the other one. So we have it programmed in already over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just switch our heading, sync our heading bug. I should be doing that anyway. I think there's a bug with syncing it, so it's putting it at 097. I think maybe I'm not sure why it's doing that. So I'm going to move it to 107. Okay, 108 right now, and switch to heading mode. And I'm doing this because we're going to change our course to a new radial inbound by a couple degrees. I just want to do that without the autopilot reacting to it. So I'm going to switch to heading mode for now. So what we're going to do is switch over from VOR 1 over to VOR 2. So we do that just by hitting the CDI button down here. So I just hit CDI, and now it's on VOR 2. And you can see it's actually reset our course here to 360. So we need to dial in the new radial. So back here, remember we're on the Victor 310. Now relative to this VOR, the radial, this is the outbound radial, would be 283. So because we're going inbound, we need to use the reciprocal of that, so the opposite of that radial. So 283, you can use the +2 -2 or the -2 +2 trick. So to get the reciprocal, instead of subtracting 180, in this case it's really easy to subtract 180 because it's 283. So we just get 100, or we get 003, or sorry, 103. So anyway, the +2 -2, we just take 2, and since it's a 2, we don't want that to become a 4, so we wouldn't add 2, we subtract 2, so that becomes 0. So then we have 083, and then for the 8, and since we subtracted 2, we add 2 to the second one, so the 8 becomes 910, so we get 103. So that's a quick reciprocal trick. So 283, we minus 2, 083, and the second digit, the 8, we add 2, it becomes 10, so 103. So in this case, remember, what's important for VORs to think about is what course do we want to fly? What direction do we want to fly? Well, we're flying east. We don't want 283, that's flying west, right? So we need the reciprocal. We're flying on this line still, so we use the reciprocal, so we are still flying eastbound. Technically, we will be on the 283 radial, because the 283 radial extends from the VOR outbound. It's always away from the VOR. Every radial originates from the VOR point itself. So in this case, yeah, we turn the 283 into a 103. So here we'll dial in 103. Remember, we were flying 108, right? We know we're heading in the similar direction. If we had anything other than a few degrees off 108 based on this flight plan right here, we would know something is wrong. You know, we were suddenly doing a 180 to fly west. We suddenly did a 180 to fly west. Obviously, we're doing something wrong. So we know that the radial or the course we're dialing in here needs to still be heading eastbound roughly. So anyway, we're on 103 for that instead of 108. So we made a slight turn to the left. And now what I'll do is switch our nav back. And it'll make that correction to pull us towards that course. So you can see that outlined VOR2 line right there. So it's flying over towards that. And it's going to get us on the 103 course instead of the 108 that we had before. So that'll keep us on the Victor 310 right here. So we're on this magenta line. So now we're still flying towards this VOR. So after this VOR, this is going to be a pretty short leg right here, only 23 miles. But we're going to switch over to another VOR. So what we can do while it's flying us there, we can check our distance. So we're still 41 miles away. So what we can do now is alternate, go back to using Navigation 1 if we want. Or we could just mirror them and make Navigation 1 our primary, like our active one if we want. I'm just going to keep it on Nav 2. So we'll switch back to Navigation 1, and we'll put in our next VOR, which is this one right here, the Liberty VOR. Then we have the identifier LIB, and then we have the frequency right here, 113.0. So we're going to put in 113.0 on our Navigation 1, because we don't need that one anymore. All right, so it was 110, so 113.0. 113.0, we swap it. And then we have it identified already. So the Garmin is decoding that Morse code for us and giving us LIB. So that's correct. If we want to listen to it, again, we can turn on, in this case, Navigation 1. Here's the Morse code. So that's correct. And that's what it decodes anyway, so LIB is correct. So we have LIB, the Morse code is correct. So next we need to figure out what direction we're flying, and therefore which radial we'll be on for this line right here, this magenta line going from this VOR to this one. So if we look at the world VFR map, it gives us, on the compass rose right here, it gives us numbers around it. You can see from here, if we go straight down, I'll just drag this so you can see what I'm doing. Straight down from here, right here, you can kind of see the 1.8. That's actually part of the compass rose for this VOR. So I'll go ahead and, there we go. So this magenta line roughly shows us the direction we'd be going. And there's no Victor airway between these two. So, so we don't have it written on the sectional. See here, this has 108 written, it has 162 written down here. So we can, you know, if we had pen and paper, we would draw a line between the two, and then we look at the compass rose here to figure it out. So with this line, if I follow this around and try to find some numbers here, it's a little difficult. There's 1.8, 1.7, 1.6, 1.5. And it's really hard to tell what I'm at. So what I could do is estimate based off what SkyVector says. SkyVector is calculating a straight line between these two, like it would with GPS, based on what magnetic north is today. But the VOR is their magnetic north varies from what is actual magnetic north, because they may not have been calibrated recently, so they vary by a few degrees. So it's nice to follow the Victor Airways because you know the exact number. So in this case, we could estimate and say, okay, the SkyVector is drawing in 131. It's saying that the course between these 2 points is 131. So we could fly the 131 radial outbound, but we wouldn't necessarily be on this magenta line. We would be off by a couple of degrees, most likely because of the variation that exists with the VOR's magnetic north. But thankfully, because we're going to another VOR, like, we'll be able to get to the VOR. So it's not really a risk. Like, we may not be on this line exactly, but we will get to the VOR. So in this case, here it says 131. So when we get to this VOR and we cross over it, we're going to switch to the other one and dial in a course. Or sorry, we're not going to switch to the other one yet. Once we cross over it, we're just going to change our course to 131. And be flying outbound on the 131 radial. So right now we're technically we're on the 283 radial flying inbound. Remember, we're on this magenta line. You can see 283 right here. This refers to the radial from the Greensboro VOR. So we're tracking the 283 radial inbound. We're doing that by flying the course that is the reciprocal of that, right? We're flying to the east. But technically the radial we're on is the 283. But we are flying on the 103 radial, or the 103 course on the 283 radial. All right, sorry, let me catch up with chat. Magenta distance is coming from your GPS data. The DME, oh yeah, that's right, is the GPS data. Oh yeah, sorry, that's right. Yes, we can instead hit DME down here under the PFD options, DME right here. Yeah, so that's right. This one, so what Les is pointing out is the magenta here, this is all calculated by the Garmin using the GPS data. This is not actually using the DME data coming from the VOR itself. So even though this is helpful, it's not true. It's not 100% accurate based on the course that we're on. So we're flying on a course or on a radial based on the VOR, then we want the DME information from the VOR itself and not from the GPS. Yeah, you would turn on the DME button here instead. So here it's showing Nav One, but we're actually using VOR 2. So this is showing our distance. You can see it matching here. Sorry, Nav One is tuned into the Liberty VOR. So we actually want the distance from the current one, which is the GSO VOR. To get that, we can change the DME from Nav 1 to Nav 2. We do that down here under the ADF DME menu. And right here it says DME mode Nav 1. So if we want the DME for Nav 2, which is what we're using to navigate right now, we just switch this to Nav 2. So now we get 25.4, so now it matches this one. So yeah, so Nav 1 is for the Liberty VOR. Nav 2 is for the VOR we're heading to now, which is right here, Greensboro. So yeah, thanks, Les. That is correct. You have wind from the left, hence the heading is correcting for the route. Yeah, so the autopilot's definitely correcting for it, but I do think there is a bug with a heading sync. So this is the weird part, see? When I push to sync the heading bug, this is like I think it's just a known bug. If I push this, it should change the blue number right here to match the white number, because this is our current heading. Yeah, the autopilot is compensating for the wind by flying a little bit left when it has to. Because we're not flying a heading of 091 right now. So we're flying a heading of 102. Now it's turning left to compensate more for the wind pushing us off course. Yeah, for some reason the heading sync is not changing to our current heading. It's going to the left. I'm not sure why that is. Because I mean, if I flew 091, that would be too much compensation for the wind. So if we did that, if I switch to heading mode right now, this is going to pull us off our radial course, I think. Resync the gyro. I don't think that's a thing with the G1000s, but if we were in an older, I'm pretty sure it automatically does that as part of the G1000. If we were in the 152, I think that would be a thing, or something without a G1000. Oh, did they? They messed up, linked the glass to the old DG. Oh, they did? I see. Maybe that is it. It's supposed to. Yeah. I was reading on that just because I was curious, like, if you had to do any syncing with the compass. Maybe that is what's happening. Yeah, that's interesting. Look now, but even now, it's something else, because like every time I click heading, it's like subtracting 10 degrees. So that's a good thought, though. I'm really curious about that now. I sound like I'm from California. I am from California. Not originally, but I've been here a long time. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, Ashley. Yeah, that's cool, Les. I didn't know that there was a bug where the glass is synced to what would be like a, you know, like a steam gauge or like an old DG, not actually using the capabilities of the G1000. But anyway, yeah, it looks like there's some bug with the heading bug sync where it doesn't put it to the right spot. But all right, I'll just put this back there. So we're still flying to our second VOR. So right now we are somewhere on this line. We are 17.8 nautical miles from the Greensboro VOR. So once we cross over the Greensboro VOR, we're going to make that right-hand turn to head to the Liberty VOR down here. So we're at 23 nautical, it's only 23 nautical miles between the Greensboro and the Liberty VOR. And I just added, I mean, we wouldn't really need to do this turn, right? We could just fly directly from here to here. But I just wanted to add another VOR into the mix just so we switch again. So yeah, we're flying on the 283 radial right now, inbound to Greensboro, which means we're on the reciprocal of that because we're the inbound. So we're on the 103. 103 is our course. So we're in here somewhere, headed towards Greensboro. Once we cross over here, we're going to make that right-hand turn. So we're going to stay on the same VOR. We're still using the Greensboro VOR for our navigation. Once we cross over, we're just going to change the course from 103 to 131. Now, the 131 isn't the precise, this is just what SkyVector is calculating for us, but it'll be close enough to get us in the right direction. And then we'll switch over to the Liberty VOR once we are on our way. This is really the downside to not following a Victor airway is we don't conveniently have the radials drawn in on the map for us. If we were going southbound or if we were going eastbound here, we see 108 drawn in right there for us, so we know that we'd use the 108 radial outbound. Here we'd know we use the 162 radial outbound on this Victor airway down here to the south, and so on. But because we're just flying kind of ad hoc on whatever radial we want, we're just kind of estimating 131. It'll be off by a few degrees just due to the declination of the VOR. So the VOR's north is going to most often be a few degrees off of what actual magnetic north is. And we can actually look those up. I didn't look those up, but you can look up what the variation on the VOR's north is by looking at the, I think it's in the, I was trying to find this the other week actually. I really wish you could like go to an information page just on the VOR itself. Is it listed for the nearby airport, I think? There is a way to find it in one of the like supplemental charts. It's not going to be in the airport diagram. I'm not sure. One of you guys probably knows how to do this. But yeah, basically the VOR, where the VOR says is north, so this line coming from it that points to 0, in the VOR's world, this is magnetic north. But this VOR, say it was installed 30 years ago, you know, magnetic north changes over time. SkyVector knows the current magnetic north. Each VOR has its own idea of what magnetic north is. All right, so we have our outer marker here. I'm going to turn that off. We're flying over some ILS. Oh, the airport lists the deviation? Yeah, I'm not sure the quickest way to find it. So would it be in the airport information? So we want to know the Greensboro VOR's magnetic variation, and we would be able to tell, we would be able to take this 131 number and adjust it for that variation. On the sectional, if you zoom out, oh, I think this is going to be a little different since I'm using SkyVector. It stitches all of them together without like the supplemental information for each chart. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I have seen them. I have seen the lines. Yeah, you're right. We can find one of those. Let me see if I can just find one. Okay, here's one. This is one right here, right? 7 degrees west. But there'll be one in the other direction. This is one of the lines right here, right? I think 7 degrees west. I know you can look up in writing as well. Yeah, I mean, we can visually see the difference here. So like this line right here, I'm still learning about this. So I feel like I'm going to misspeak about this, but yeah, I don't personally know the easiest way to look that up. If you're not on a Victor airway, how do you find the difference in the current magnetic variation with what magnetic north actually is right now? Add 7 degrees to true. Yeah, that's, so SkyVector doesn't use true, right? SkyVector is using magnetic as well. So right here, SkyVector's, and then here's 8 degrees west right here. So in this case, 131, this is magnetic for SkyVector based on what is magnetic north right now. Navigraph says -8 degrees variation. Yeah, how did you find that? See, maybe I need to use Navigraph more. Navigraph says -8 degrees variation. So if it's -8 degrees variation and then the sectional here also says 8 degrees, 8 degrees west, then does that cancel out? Does that mean that this is actually pointing north then? So this would be correct. 131 would actually be that radial in this case. -8 degrees being -8 being west, correct? Open the info menu. Oh, a VOR Navigraph. I don't have Navigraph opened up right now. Yeah, this is something I have to do. I have to learn. I have to do some more actual learning on, is how to find that quickly and how to compensate for it. Generally, like, you know, using the Victor Airways is super convenient since it's right there. It tells you exactly which radial you're doing, outbound and inbound. So that's always easy. In this case, yeah, I'd have to figure out the actual variation since we're not following a Victor Airway. All right, let's see our distance now. Oh, we're close, 2.6 miles from GSO. So once we cross over, oh, we actually crossed over already. All right, we're on the way out now. So yeah, we need to switch over to, I'm just gonna do 131. That's gonna turn us to the south more. And now it switched us into roll mode because I did that. So I'm gonna use heading mode to take us to the new course. All right, thanks, Lazaro. Yeah, so we have crossed over now. So it actually switched us to roll mode when we crossed over. But no, it was just staying on the same one, wasn't it? It was still just keeping us outbound on the VOR. All right, so now we're turning to a 131. The 131 radial, which isn't going to match up perfectly with what line is drawn here. No, I don't have an IFR rating, no. I don't have any rating. I'm an armchair captain. Okay, so here we're on the 131 outbound now, which is not going to match up perfectly with what route is drawn here, but we'll still be able to get over here to the Liberty VOR. I think if you tune the next VOR and center the course line with a 2 indication, you should fly it to the VOR. Yes. Yeah, we'll definitely be able to get to the VOR. But whether or not we are precisely on the radial we intend to be on is what's going to be wrong. Because, well, first of all, because I don't personally know how to do the variation calculation in real time right now. And yeah, second, because we're not using the Victor Airways. So right here, if we were using the Victor Airways, we would be confident that we're on the airway itself and on the correct, just on the airway. But here, like, yeah, we can just use the needles to, we know we'll be able to get to the VOR, right? As long as you are tuned into the VOR, we can fly any course to get to the VOR, so that'll be right. And we know we'll be on the radial relative to that VOR. That'll be accurate too. But there will be a variation between what's shown here in Sky Vector and where we are. We're going to be a little off this course because of the variation. Just because this is drawn using what magnetic north is in Sky Vector's world versus what each VOR thinks its magnetic north is. But yeah, that's why the Victor Airways just simplify it. It's, you know, we'll be on the 108 outbound, and then suddenly we'll be on the, like, the 287 or whatever inbound. So, like, there'll be a variation on both ends of a straight line Victor Airway because of that difference in the VOR's magnetic north, what each VOR thinks is magnetic north. Anyway, sorry. I really want to dive into that stuff. You guys are like, some of you are thinking, I know how to do that. He needs to learn. And I'm thinking, I know some people here know how to do that, and I need to learn how to do that. So anyway, let's just get to the next VOR for now. So here we're going to the Liberty VOR 113.0. So let's go ahead and tune that one in. Oh yeah, we already did. It's tuned on right here in Navigation 1. So I'm going to keep it on heading mode. Wow, we're way off course actually. Whoops. Getting distracted. So we're going to fly towards this again. We're off course, so I'm going to fly back on towards course. This is the course outbound, 131 radial outbound here from Greensboro. So we're flying, we want to fly on this, roughly this magenta line. So I'm going to fly back towards that using autopilot just with the heading mode. But what we're going to do is fly inbound now. And this is not too far. This is only 23 miles. We're only 10 miles away from the Liberty VOR, so we're just going to switch over. So basically, we have the 131 is the direction we're heading, or the course we're flying outbound. So the reciprocal of that would be our inbound radial, but basically we still want to fly the same direction. So we just want to change over to tune into the same VOR, and we can leave the course on the same setting. So all we have to do now is switch from Nav 1 or Nav 2 over to Nav 1 to use the Liberty VOR instead. So I'm just going to go to CDI button right here and click this twice. So now we're on VOR 1. And the course is this, oh, the course got reset. So the course is no longer 131. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to change this back to 131. And now we're still heading towards it. So we're doing the same thing. We're flying to the same magenta line in our flight plan that we're a little bit south of right now because I got off track. Instead of referencing the Greensboro VOR outbound, we're referencing the Liberty VOR inbound. But since we're flying the same direction, the same course, this is still the same. The only difference now is that since we have a 2 flag, if somebody asked us which radial we were going to be tracking inbound, we wouldn't say the 131 because the 131 radial would be down here in this area. Since we're northwest and we have a 2 flag, we need to use the reciprocal. So we're not going to be on the 131 radial because if you think of it as a physical thing, we can't be on the 131 radial because that's towards the east side of the VOR. We're towards the west of the VOR. So it would be the reciprocal of that. So 1, we just add 2, so we get 3. 3, we subtract 1, we get 1, so we get the 311 radial. So we're going to be flying inbound to the Liberty VOR on the 311 radial. The course we're flying is 131, but technically the radial we're on is the 311. All right, since this is the needle's coming in now, I'm going to switch back to navigation mode to let our autopilot do the hard work for us. But what we would do if we're flying this by hand is just when that is about to get to the middle, we would turn to fly that course of 131. So I'm just doing the autopilot just because it makes my life a lot easier while I'm clicking everywhere and reading chat and all that stuff. And I love autopilot. All right, so now we're on we're flying a course of 131 towards the Liberty VOR. We're only 4.2 miles away from it. And remember, since we have a 2 flag, this is the 2 flag I mentioned earlier. This little arrow right here, if it's on the same side as the big arrow head, if these two are synced up, that's a 2 flag. If this arrow's detached over here on the opposite side, that would be a from flag. So we'll see that happen once we cross over. And now that we're getting close, the autopilot is going to go into some sort of... It's basically going to fly us straight and not try to hold the VOR course perfectly because we're getting so close to it. It would be very difficult for it to stay perfectly on that. And then once we cross over, it's basically we're gonna see that 2 flag flip to a from flag when that happens. LA Kids, would you ever consider using the VOR only option of SimBrief? Oh, is that an option? I didn't actually know that was an option. That's cool. I'll check that out after the stream. I didn't know you could do that with SimBrief. If you're tuned into the VOR, you don't need to correct magnetic variation. At that point, you're flying your indicated heading. Yeah. So I think I'm getting a little too in my own head about the sky vector thing. All right, I'll come back to that in a second. So here, the needle is deflecting way away, and this is just because we're about to fly over the VOR. So it's getting confused. Basically, we're flying right over it. It can't give us the information on where we are. It's blanking out, and it's going to come back in a second. Now it has a from flag, now that we're over the VOR, and now we'll see the needle slowly come into the middle again. So we just flew over the VOR. And now we have the from flag. So before that green arrow was all the way up here, attached to this side of the arrow, where the big arrowhead is. So that was the 2 flag. But now that we've crossed over, we have a from flag. So this arrow down here is our from flag on the G1000. So what that's saying is, if we fly a course of 131, we will be flying away from the VOR. And really, any course that we dial in here where the from flag is still shown, it'll be indicating to us that if we do fly that course, we're going to be flying away from the VOR instead of towards it. All right, so now we just got to this point where we crossed over. So we're down here in this area somewhere. We want to fly eastbound on this New Victor Airway 194. Right here we have 088 drawn in for us, so we want to fly a course of 088. Remember, that's the way we want to fly, so we're just going to dial in 088. So I'm just going to turn this to 088. And the autopilot is going back to a default mode of roll. So we need to, if we want to continue using the autopilot, we're just going to turn to intercept that course again with heading mode. So I'm turning the heading bug here to the left. So we're making this left-hand turn, right? We were flying down here in this direction, but we need to get over to here. So we're making that left turn to go to that next leg of our flight. So we're trying to get to this point. All right, and now heading mode's taking us over towards our new course. And then what I'm gonna do is put Nav Mode on standby. So if I hit Nav Mode, it's armed now. You can see it in VOR is in white. So here, we just need to get closer to our course, and then the autopilot will automatically enable VOR. It'll automatically activate navigation mode for the VOR once we get close enough to the course. The same thing happens if you fly with the G1000 NXi on a GPS course. You have to be close enough to the course within a half scale deflection or deviation. So this inner dot right here. So once this line is inside this inner little white circle, that'll be close enough to the course for it to capture it and activate navigation mode. This is something you have to do in GPS mode and in VOR mode. Anytime you're far off of the intended course, you have to either manually fly there, or you can use heading mode, like I am right here, to fly closer to that course. In SimBrief, click on Route Finder and select VOR only. Oh, reverse sensing, yeah. Reverse sensing is so confusing. Yeah, how the needle will be deflected the opposite direction of your course. Yeah, it's very weird. I don't even want to think about it. All right, so thank you, autopilot. So it's turning us right onto our course now. So yeah, I've done this in the 152. If you want to practice this by hand, and I'm a dork that uses autopilot way too much, but when I've flown it, if you want to force yourself to hand fly this, use the Cessna 152. It has no autopilot at all. It does have 2 navigation radios and 2 CDIs. So that's really nice. So you can monitor where you are with a second CDI if you want to, or, you know, do what we're doing and alternate between the two. All right, so now we are on this magenta line right here. So we're going here from the Liberty VOR over to our next VOR here. This is the Raleigh Durham VOR. So we're going to dial this in. It's actually a VORTAC 117.2. So let's tune into this one. Again, we're using VOR 1 or Navigation 1 right now. So we're going to switch it. And we're going to put in Navigation 2, we're going to put in the Raleigh VORTAC 117.2. So here's 113.4567, 117.2. There it is. And now we hit the little swap button. And then we have Romeo Delta Uniform, RDU is the identifier code, which is correct. So we see RDU right there. And if we want to listen to the Morse code, this is what the G1000 is decoding for us and turning into the letters. But if we want to hear R, D, and U spelled out, we can just turn on our Navigation 2 radio in this case. So we'll just turn on Navigation 2 and we can listen for that. And that's correct. So you got short, long, short. So that matches the pattern, so we're good. We were already good because these letters are derived from the audio. As far as I know, it actually listens and decodes it. This is not VFR right now. We would be climbing right now to stay well clear of these clouds. All right, so now we have both of them tuned in. So we're still flying outbound on the Liberty VOR. And what I can do here, the DME info down here was on Nav 2. So you can actually change that between Nav 1 and Nav 2 if you're using the DME info by using this window. So you hit ADF DME, gives you this pop-up, and then use the FMS knob to change the DME mode from Nav 1 to Nav 2, whichever one you're interested in. So this is showing, and we're using the GPS data on these two bearings for basically the same information. But the DME, yeah, is showing we're 14 miles away from the Liberty VOR and 26 miles away from the next VOR, which is Raleigh Durham. And so we're on that 088 course. So here we have 088 dialed in. So we're just continuing on that. So we're on this magenta line right now. Not quite halfway, but we're getting there. And then we can also check to see if there's a crossover point on this one. Doesn't look like there is. So if there was a published crossover point, it would tell us when to switch from one VOR to the next. So when to switch from our outbound VOR to our inbound VOR. But there's nothing along this line. It's just shows the waypoint. There's no indication of a crossover. So we'll just do it at halfway. And just because we have all this information with the G1000, we can see when halfway exactly is when these numbers are equal. So we'll chill and wait for that. Probably speed up the sim. Yeah, I didn't know about these crossover points until recently. But yeah, here's one of the crossover points. This is what it looks like. You can find them on the world's low airways charts. So right here where it says 20 and it's got this line that goes, straight like double L shape. This shows the distance that you're supposed to switch over to the other VOR. Sorry, do I still have the nav radio on? Oh, no, I don't. Okay. So in this case, say, for example, we were flying from this Liberty VOR on Victor 454. This is a much longer distance we're flying compared to what we're flying now. We're just flying right between these two down here. But if we're flying all this distance, what's really convenient is on the low altitude airway charts, if you follow the Victor airway line, it'll show you where to cross over, where to switch to the other VOR. And in this case, what it's showing is on this side, this little line says 82. So that means we're going to track outbound using this VOR, the Liberty VOR, for 82 miles of this leg. We only switch over to this VOR right here, the Lawrence VOR, when we're at 20 miles. And if we did the opposite direction, see the 20 is pointing in this direction. So this black line leading up to the crossover point, we would use that for 20 miles outbound and then switch over to use Liberty for the rest of this way inbound to Liberty. I didn't know that before, and it's awesome. And then I think what the rule is if there's no published crossover point, what you do is fly halfway. So if there's no point like this, then you just, at the halfway point, you would switch over. Or, you know, in the case that you lost the signal of the current VOR, so we're flying over some terrain or some interference happens or the VOR has a malfunction and goes out, then obviously we still want to have our navigation reference, so we would switch over early in that case to the other VOR so we have something. At least that's what I would do in the sim. I don't fly real airplanes. If you do, talk to a real instructor. Disclaimer. Yes, I would do that in the sim. I don't actually fly airplanes. I didn't know you could listen to Morse code. Yeah. Yeah, I learned that earlier just because if you don't use the G1000 or you don't have one of the Garmin's, if you fly the 152 or something like that in the sim, it doesn't have anything fancy in it. All you have is 2 comm radios, 2 nav radios, and then 2 CDIs. You know, it's all steam gauge. So you don't get the fancy decoding like these do. So these are, as far as I know, the Garmin actually listens to the audio and decodes the audio into the letters, since the Morse code pattern is just spelling those letters. So in this case, you know, ... spells out an L. So it's just decoding that for our convenience. So if in the case you don't have a G1000 or any kind of Garmin or avionics that are decoding that for you, you can always turn on the radio itself to listen to what's coming through on that frequency. Oh, you can listen to AM radio on an ADF. That is so cool. I wish you could do that in the sim, yeah. I don't really use ADF, but yeah, if you use ADF, it's really hard to find NDBs for the most part. Here's one right here, actually. Of course I say that, and then there's one right here. The world low map makes it a lot easier. So this is the ALAM or the HB NDB. So there's the frequency 361. Something I didn't cover yet, because we have all this tech in the G1000, is like how you would use your second navigation radio to figure out where you are based on another VOR. We're more than halfway now. This turboprop's pretty fast, so we're going pretty fast. But what we could do if we didn't have all this fancy information, what we could do is use another VOR to figure out where we are on this course. So for example, right down here, I don't know if this will be in range or not, but right down here we have a VOR DME. Oh, here's one too. So here's the what is that's a Vortac, I guess? That's weird. What's that icon? I actually don't know what this icon is right here. It's like a Vortac without the blocks on the end of it. Anyway, so this one right here, this VOR DME Fayetteville, 108.8. If we didn't have all this fancy tech and we want to figure out how far we are, or roughly where we are on our magenta course line here, what we could do is tune in to this VOR and then figure out which radial we're on, and then we could draw a line and figure out kind of precisely, or approximately where we are on this line, on our magenta course line. So 108.8 for Fayetteville. So if I can tune that in, we're using, what we should do is switch over right now. So I'm going to switch over to use VOR2 RDU, and it's on the wrong radial. So we don't want 274. We need the reciprocal of 274. So that would be 094. So I'll tune in 094. That should center the needle. Yep, it does. So 094. Now I can go back to navigation mode. All right, sorry. So I just switched over from from this VOR, the Liberty VOR, over here to this VOR. But if we want to find out where we are on this magenta line, we can do it by using another VOR that we're not currently near, and then figure out which radial we're on. So, I mean, we could use this one up here too. So here's Danville, 113.1. We're getting close to the VOR, so we're 7 miles away, so this is kind of last minute. But what I can do is go to our unused navigation radio 1. We're going to dial in this VOR randomly, 113.1. Okay, we tune in. So there's Dan, so that's that VOR. I'm going to put us in heading mode because I don't want to change where the plane's actually flying, and because we're going to change our CDI source. So now we're flying towards this VOR. What I want to know is what radial are we on from this VOR right here, this Danville regional VOR. So we tuned into it. So what I can do, I don't know if you can see, it's this one right here. This is the one I'm talking about. So we're going to use the trick to just center the needle and find out which radial we're on to draw a line and determine where we are on this magenta line. So we're just using it as another reference. So we're on this magenta line right here, and all I have to do is switch over to VOR 1, and then I just turn the knob. We'll turn the course knob, and what we want to do is center the needle with a from flag, and that's how you tell which radial you're currently on. There it is right there. So this is the from flag, that little arrow on the opposite side of the big arrow. So that's from. If it was 2, it would be on the other end. So with the needle centered, it says 157. So that means if we draw a line from here on a 157, on the 157 radial based on this compass rose, that's where we would find where we are on this line. So we're referencing where we are, where our position is based on that second VOR. So we would draw that line and then be like, oh, we're right around here. Anyway, we're getting very close, so let's switch over back to VOR 2. Turn nav mode back on. We're really close. We're 2.5 miles, so we're about to fly over our next VOR. So we're flying over right here, right now. Yes, also on the bearing indicator, yeah. Yeah, the bearing indicator, this is, yeah, again, with all the tech you have in the G1000, it's pretty nuts, so... yeah, you can see we're flying over. The VOR is about to be right under us. We can actually see it on the map right here too. I zoom all the way in. There's the VOR. We're flying over it right now. And yeah, we can turn on a bearing pointer in the G1000, so it'll just point to where the VOR is. Or if we were using if we were using ADF, it would point to where the NDB is. All right, so there we flew right over it. So right down here, I'm just going to turn off the DME just to reduce how much clutter is here. We'll just use the GPS data. Oops, PFD options, DME. Yeah, so it says 0 here, and if we turn the bearings on, like I could turn this bearing off. This bearing for Nav One, this will just point to where the VOR is. So we could just fly that course of, 335 or 332 or whatever that is. We could just turn to 332 and just fly right back to the VOR. So this will always show us, it'll point to where the VOR is. If you're flying in the 152, you don't get that convenience of this bearing pointer. You have to twist the knob to find out which radial you're on to find the way to it. So in this case, we would, it would result in the same thing. So I'll just switch our heading. We're going to totally miss our destination airport at this point because I'm getting distracted, but if you didn't have this bearing needle here and you wanted to find out how to get to the VOR, we would just turn this until the needle is centered. Centered with a 2 flag. Whoops, this is RDU. Wait, am I right here? VOR 2. We're still on RDU. Oh, there we go. Which direction are we flying from that right now? I'm getting confused. So we're east from the VOR. There it is. We're flying a little more northeast from it. So if we wanted to fly to the VOR, yeah, we would just turn this until the needle was centered with a 2 flag. And then that's the course we would fly to get to that VOR. All right, so in this case, 261. So if we just turn around and fly 261, then we would get to the VOR. We could track that same radial if we want, but... And then, yeah, and then there's Nav 2. So if I turn the Nav 2 on, you see it's pointing right to that VOR as well. So it's the same thing. So if you didn't have that bearing needle, this is how you would find out. The 2 flag or the VOR, and that's the course you would fly to get to it. And then to find out which radial you're on, you do the opposite. You turn it until you have the needle centered with a from flag, and that's how you know which radial you're currently on, which of course is just the opposite. In roll mode. Yeah, so if you switch, it looks like it doesn't remember your course when you switch bearing sources, or when you switch navigation sources. So whenever I hit the CDI button, it'll switch me over to roll mode if I'm in navigation mode. So I'll have to switch. It's better, I guess, to switch manually to heading mode before making those changes, just so the plane doesn't just randomly start flying in a direction when we're not ready for it to. Okay, so to get to that airport, we're already like way off course. So what I'm going to do now is just turn around and fly back towards the VOR. So I'm just going to do that by putting the heading indicator to where the bearing is pointing. And then what we can do is, again, this is just estimating from, this is what I was going to kind of going off on a tangent about that I need to do more learning on, is the variation. So if I want to precisely get from this VOR, or use this VOR to get to this airport that's south of it right here, 5W5, if I draw this line in like I have with SkyVector, it does calculate 174 right here. So it calculates a course of 174 down to get to that. But this is not going to be the same as the radial from the VOR. So this is based off what is now magnetic north at this moment in time, because SkyVector is constantly updated. The VOR, however, is going to be pointing a direction a few degrees off one way or the other. So what I was trying to figure out is, what's the quickest way to look up the variation in that declination of the VOR and then calculate it based off this. So in this case, I would take 174 and I'd either add or subtract that variation to know which outbound radial to fly on to get more precisely to this airport. Because if I put in 174, like this is really close, it's only 16 miles, so we're not going to be off too far. But if I flew like 50 miles, obviously the further away we get, that 3 degrees turns into much more distance, of a difference the further we get away. So that's what I was just kind of rambling about. So I need to figure out how to do that. I'd like to learn how to do that. So be able to just look up this VOR, look up the magnetic variation, so I know precisely how to modify this calculation of 174 to get to this airport. So if I dial in 174, we'll probably be a couple of degrees off. The VOR is adjusted, but the VOR itself, its magnetic north, its 0, is going to be different than this, because SkyVector is calculating based on today's magnetic variation. The VOR, say it hasn't been calibrated for 20 years, it'll have a difference in its variation. There's going to be a variation difference. Like this arrow right here, this is magnetic north as far as the VOR is concerned. But this is not necessarily truly magnetic north right now. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that calculation. So like if I clear my flight plan out and I just do a flight plan from this VOR up to a random point up here, and I put it directly on that line. So this line is supposed to be magnetic north. It's not necessarily going to say 0 or 360. The VOR is aligned with magnetic north. It's not every VOR is aligned with magnetic north though. Every VOR has a variation, right? Which is why it's published that when you look up the information for the VOR, it actually tells you what the variation is. So like if I go down here, for example, if I look at 2 Victor Airways, for example, so here's one. Look how close these two VORs are together. And then look at the 2 radials that are shown. 212, 034. It's 2 degrees off. They should both end with the same number if they're both calculated for magnetic north, right? Why does this end in a 2 and this one ends in a 4? And that's because this VOR and this VOR, they have a difference in where they're aligned to magnetic north. Each one's magnetic north is different from its own perspective. I mean, this is a very short, this is 30 miles. And there's a 2 degree difference. So I can't just fly outbound from this on the 212. I'm going to end up 2 degrees to the left or to the right. Or not in that case. I mean, that would still work. 212 would still work. But if I'm heading inbound, obviously, you know, I'm switching. I'm changing those 2 other degrees. It ends in a 2. This one ends in a 4. So I'm coming inbound on the 034 radial, but I was leaving outbound on the 212 radial. If these were both aligned to the same magnetic north, these numbers would end in the same number. I mean, they're very close to each other. It's 30 miles, so. I don't know the answer on how to quickly to figure out that variation compared to SkyVector, like, because on SkyVector, if I plan this route too, just between these 2 VORs, I choose this one, and I choose this one. What does SkyVector say? It says nothing right now. Why doesn't it say anything? To plan a few more points, I think. I can't get it to do it. Yeah, I see there's also a Tango Airway there too, yeah. I mean, let me do, well, that's what I get on this map. Okay, here, I'll do another one. One I'm more familiar with. So I'll go back to California. Okay, so I'm in the VFR map, so we're getting, here's the Victor Airway, 195, 015. So this matches up, right? 015 and 195. Where's the closer one? I need to find 2 more that are near each other with the Victor Airway between them. 109, there's 109 and 289, so that one checks out. Here you go. Here's Victor 12 between these 2 VORs, 079, 261. And if you just look at the arrows, you can see this left one, 0 is pointing more to the east than the 0 on this one. Gaviota VOR is pointed more to the right. San Marcos is pointed a little more to the left. Like, these angles are not the same. And because of that, we have a 2 degree variation right here in this short of an airway. So if it's 261, you would expect the other radial to be the reciprocal of 261, 081, but it's not 081, it's 079. So that's, I ran into this a while ago and I was really confused by it. And maybe I still am confused by it, but I was doing something where I was like doing a plan like this and they weren't matching up. You know, SkyVector was telling me to follow a different heading than was shown on the radial, even though I was, you know, planning the same exact route. It wasn't saying 079. I was like, why isn't it saying a different radial? Why is it saying a different course? Anyway, yeah, this is the thing that I'm confused by, or I was confused by. But as far as I know, this is because each VOR has its own variation to what magnetic north is until they're recalibrated. Anyway, let's try to get to this. I'm going to keep researching it. I want to know the answer. I want to know if I'm wrong. I want to know if I'm partially right. You know, that's what I've been reading about, and it just, yeah, it confused me. So let me try to get to this airport now. I'm probably way off course. So what I want to do is get back to the RDU VOR And I've lost my whole flight plan already, so I totally messed up here. No, I didn't make the turn, Merlin. I've just been thinking about VORs and the magnetic variation. So let's find RDU. So it's here, and I was getting down here to 5W5. So I'm just going to put this back in really quickly. All right, so roughly 174. So what I want to do is get back to that VOR. So we'll get back to the Raleigh-Durham VOR, or VORTAC 117.2. So we're still dialed into that. So we're going to make our source VOR2. And all we want to do is fly directly to the VOR. So all I have to do is turn this until the arrow is centered, or the needle is centered with a 2 flag. So we have that. So now I know I just need to make a 180, get back to it. We'll just turn us around. And then we'll switch back to navigation mode, and then we'll get ready to make our right-hand turn. The clouds are pretty insane too, so. And in this area, I think our safe altitude, okay, 2,500 right here, 2,400. So we can go down, let's go down to like 5,500 feet for now. So I'm gonna take us down because we have all these clouds. Obviously, we're not, we wouldn't be allowed to fly in this if we were actually flying in VFR for real. But we're in the sim, so we can pretend. All right, so vertical speed mode. Let's head down. Pull our power out. We definitely try to just poke through some of these clouds and find a hole. Could do it right there. All right, so there's VOR2, so we're flying parallel to it, so we're going to turn to intercept that course now. And I can put on navigation mode since we're close enough to the course. And we're descending, and the sun's coming down too. Be a good time to land. And then so what we're going to do is head south. Once we cross over that VOR, we want to head south here on roughly the 174 radial. I'm not going to do the... in this stream, I'm not going to be able to figure out the variation between the radial and then an actual magnetic north. So there is probably a couple degrees of variation between this calculation and the VOR radial, but we're just going to use 174 for now. Hey, this is perfect. We can actually get down. If we get down fast enough, we can get down through the clouds without going through them. Pulling the power. There we go. Use an EFB where you can watch your ground track. Oh yeah, I try to do as much as I can just using the sim. But yeah, I love using ForeFlight so much. Whenever, like when I do on-air, when I'm using on-air company off stream, like I use ForeFlight like crazy. I love it. It's awesome. It's really easy to connect ForeFlight to the sim too. There's a program called FF2 or FS2FF, so ForeFlight 2 Flight Sim, and it's really easy to use. Go back to the map. You can see the line on the 174 is next to the 175 tick. Yes, yeah, you're right. So here's 180. That would be 175. It's a little to the right of that, and it says 174 is what it calculated. So yeah, in this case, it could be accurate, but as far as I know, every VOR, since they all get calibrated at different times, there are times when they are not, when the 0 or the 360 magnetic north of the VOR is not actually aligned to real magnetic north. So there's a variation. And then if you look up the documentation, I forget how to get to it. I'll have to research this more, but there is a way to see the VOR listed, and then Yes, I agree. Yeah. The VOR compass rose is accurate. That's correct. Yeah, what we see here visually is accurate. This based on the radial. So this is the 180 radial for that VOR. Yeah, 100%. But if I can do this with another one, but if I drop this point like this, so here you go. Sky Vector, for example, this isn't a drastic difference. It says 179 instead of 180. And that's because if the VOR is off by 1 degree, which can happen, or 3 or 4 degrees, what I'm trying to find out is just I'm trying to calculate it based off Sky Vector's calculation. You know, Sky Vector is saying today, right now, knowing where magnetic north really is, this is a 174 course to get from there to this airport. This VOR, let's say for sake of argument, it's a rotated 90 degrees. That would be shown on the compass rose. You know, it would say 090 right here instead of 180. And that would still be the radial, right, for the VOR. But in terms of what is actually magnetic north, there'll be a variation. So what I'm trying to figure out is what's the quickest way for me to look up the variation for the VOR and then use that to change what's calculated by Sky Vector. Because Sky Vector is calculating based off magnetic north, not the radial. That's what I'm trying to figure out how to do, or what I want to learn to do. I'm almost stalling here because my throttle is low still from descending. Anyway, yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Yeah, you can definitely just look at the compass rose, draw a line, and then use the compass rose to estimate the radial. But I'm just trying to figure out a quick way to do that based on what Sky Vector is calculating, which is not based on the VOR radial. The airway is slightly bent. Yeah, that one we followed is slightly bent. Oh, I deleted it, but yeah, it had a slight bend because it hit an intersection. And then, yeah, at that point, we switched over to the other VOR. I mean, you know, VOR navigation isn't like 100% precise, right? So we're on the right path. But I was doing it one day. I think I was trying to work on a VOR video where I was navigating quite a long distance, and I was very far off from where I thought I was. And the reason was because I was navigating based off what Sky Vector calculated as the heading or the course to fly. And I was dialing that in as the radial I was flying on. And because of that variation, and because of the long distance I was flying, I ended up like miles away from the airport I was trying to get to. And I was super confused. And that's when I started, I forget when that was, probably like 6 months ago, or I don't know, it's been a bit. And so I was really confused about what was happening. I was like, how is the airport not in front of me? I calculated the route. I looked at what Sky Vector said was the course, and then I used that on the radial. It's because the radial is off by a few degrees on the VOR I was using. So yeah, it wasn't totally calibrated. Anyway, that's where my confusion stemmed from, and I was just super confused. It's still kind of confusing. It's like, yeah, a lot to know, of course. You don't know what you don't know, and then I didn't know that that there was a variation between the VOR radials and where magnetic north was. Oh, Flight Plan Go. Yeah, I tried that out a little bit. I'm a little spoiled by using ForeFlight. Yeah, it's definitely pricey to have ForeFlight, especially if you're just simming. I really got it just to have it as a passenger when my girlfriend is flying. But yeah, I've mostly used it in the sim, but I got it a while ago just to have it so I could have it as a passenger, just kind of out of my own interest. All right, so we're coming up to that VOR again, so the RDU VOR, and once we get there, we're gonna turn southbound, and I'm just gonna fly this Sky Vector calculated course of 174. I'm gonna dial that in as the radial. Pilot deviation, yep. We would definitely not be doing this. I should have like poked through the clouds, just like dive bomb through the clouds. I know people hate the phrase dive bomb. I use it for real. ForeFlight in Canada is way more expensive. Oh, to add Canadian charts. Do you use the Jeppesen charts then? All right, so this VOR is here on the field. So once we get to this, we're gonna turn to the right. We're gonna turn to the south, and then we're gonna fly right here. We have 16 miles calculated. So if we fly on the 174 radial, it might be off a degree or two where the actual radial is. For 16 miles, we should see our airport here, 5W5. Charts in Flight Plan Go are the Nav Canada charts. Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, from what I heard on like YouTube and stuff is pretty much everyone uses Jeppesen charts when they're doing IFR stuff. It's like the standard. I do not have those on my on ForFlight because they're expensive. But if you just sim, Navigraph is amazing. Navigraph gives you access to like, you know, sim only use Jeppesen charts. So the value is really cool. It's a really big value if you want those charts for simming. All right, so I'm gonna sync the heading bug. I'm gonna do that manually. Switch back to heading mode. We're about to pass over the VOR right here. So we're gonna switch out to our course right here, 174. Even if it's not 100% accurate, it'll get us to the airport. Close enough. So we're gonna switch the course to 174 right here. And I'm just gonna start making that turn a little bit already. And the airport elevation we're going to is like 200 feet, I think. And we're at 3,500. All right, and then I'm turning on navigation mode on standby. So it's here, it's armed for VOR navigation. Course 174. You can see the bearing pointer is turning because we're flying past the VOR. So that's pointing at where the VOR is, which is now off our left wing. All right, now it's capturing. Whoa, that came in really fast. All right, it's gonna overshoot it a little bit. For sim, Navigraph's awesome. Yeah, Navigraph is such a good value. Like you get a moving map, you get the Jeppesen charts. It's really nice. And you can get it in the top menu up here too. They have an add-on, so if you do VR especially, like you can pull it up in VR as a floating window. You know, or just for convenience if you don't want to tab out or you don't want to tile your windows or anything like that. All right, so 2.2 miles. So yeah, so this is, oh, it's on Nav One. That's why we don't have DME. Oops. So I'm going to switch back DME to Nav 2 right here. So we're 3 miles away now. So we're going to fly, what was it, 16 nautical miles. We'll have the airport in front of us. But it could be a few degrees off just because the radial, I'm not choosing the radial based on the VOR. I just let SkyVector calculate the magnetic course, which may not be aligned with the VOR radial. So we'll see. I do want to figure out for the next time I'm doing VOR how to quickly look up that variation. I mean, the easiest thing would just be to only fly on Victor Airways, so you don't even worry about magnetic north versus the radial. But yeah, I think it'll be good to know how to do that kind of calculation, or just look it up. I mean, I know in theory what to do. We look up the deviation and then we add or subtract that from what SkyVector is calculating for us, and then we'll know which radial to use for that VOR. All right, let's go down a bit lower. All right, we're 5 miles away, so we're 10 miles away from the airport. I think the field elevation is 200 feet, so ultimately we're going to want to get down to about 1,200 or maybe like 1,700 feet. All right, and can we see the airport? We probably can't see it yet because I have filters on to not see the small airports. So I can just change my detail. Oh yeah, I have it filtered out. Let's go to menu, aviation, and then I can show the small airports at a larger zoom range. They're 15 miles. Oh, I thought 40. All right, that's enough. Anyway, there's the airport. Okay, so there's 5W5. That's where we're heading to. Is that it right there? It's probably it right there. And I like fried my own brain a little thinking about all the VOR stuff. And now I just have like a to-do item right when I get off the stream is learn more about the magnetic variation on VORs, how to look it up. I know one of you guys said they're calibrated, or Les, you said they're calibrated every 30 days. Farther away from the VOR, the less accurate it becomes. Yeah, that's actually how, that's why I didn't like post this video or anything, but when I was making that video, I was 2992. It's 2995. I haven't updated it. I'll update it right now. Yeah, sorry, I'm so distracted by just thinking and talking about VORs and stuff that I'm not doing all the perfect procedures here. Yeah, when I was doing that test and I was trying to I was like working on a video for navigating with VORs. I was using like cross radials and stuff and trying to accurately fly to an airport in the middle of nowhere. And what happened was I was like miles and miles off course because of how far, yeah, first of all, how far I was, but also because of the variation. And actually, we should be landing on the other side of this runway because the wind is at our back. So I'm gonna fly around. Yeah, so I was super far off because of that, and I was just really confused, and I didn't realize how much they could vary from magnetic north. Subdued rat. We have a 17 knot tailwind right now. That would have been a horrible idea to land on that side. It's a tight runway. Oh, great. My favorite. This will be just fine. Taking my time here. I don't want to have too little distance. This is where VR is so nice, just like making these turns and not using the preset camera positions. It's so much easier in VR, but I don't really use VR that much, even though I have it, just because I think I can only do it for like, I've been climbing this whole time too. I don't think I can do it that long, so I just end up getting like, not really a headache, but just like kind of like, I feel like my eyes are kind of like glazed over and kind of weird. It doesn't play well with my brain when I can only do it for like 45 minutes and then I feel like I'm done. the world's largest pattern. All right, the smart camera is working again. The smart camera is awesome. Sometimes it clicks to the wrong thing, but it's really helpful for this kind of thing. Like when you don't use track IR, you don't use VR. All right, we got 14 knots off to the right of our nose. It's fun. I can see the shadow of the trees too right there. Oh yeah, this is crazy. Yeah, it's tight for sure. Oh my god. This is gnarly. This is the smallest runway. Oh god. What? That's crazy. What? Just... Wow. All right. That was way more challenging than I expected it to be. I guess we picked a good good destination randomly. That got a little shady at the end there. He did it in a twin. Tight runway reminds me of when I flew the family to Sutton, West Virginia. KSXL, the south end of the runway is a cliff drop off. Oh man. For as bright as those lights were, it looked like it was going to be like a decent size. I mean, I saw when we took off, I think it was a 3,000 foot runway. Was it 25? I think it was I think this one's 3,000 feet. I like the randomness of doing it too, and like the surprise. It just makes it really fun. Hopefully a little bit entertaining. Like, I can't wait for my rudder pedals are so hard to push right now, so when I land and I'm braking, it's I like have to put my weight on the toes because I have the crosswinds and it takes so much pressure to push the brakes down, even on the lightest setting. I should probably bind it like a button temporarily until I get pedals that are easier for me to use. Definitely challenging though. I switched the very large foot pedals on these with the shorter ones. And it's nice that they're really compact, but of course, when they're shorter, that means you have less leverage, so it's harder to push them. So I'm not sure that it was... I think I might have to go back to the larger ones, even though I think they're kind of comically large. That was a scary landing. I was like, I'm gonna clip the trees. I'm gonna be off the right side and hit the trees. That was pretty challenging. Whew. I definitely feel like I can't imagine like flying in real life either, because this is like mentally taxing just in the sim. Maybe it's from like talking through everything and getting distracted with VORs and courses and stuff, like trying to learn while I'm flying. But I can't imagine how... I mean, you've got to be mentally like solid and like ready to go when you're flying. I just can't imagine how much attention it takes when you're doing it for real. Whew, that was yeah, that was intense. How long is this runway? I know I forgot to start the mission and whoops, that's the wrong one. Where's the one we just did? Here it is. I thought it was 3,000 feet. Maybe it's 25. No, I think it's 2,500. Oh, it is 3,000. Okay. Departure was longer. 4,500 on departure, but this one, yeah, lit 1.6 and 3.4, 20, so 3,000 feet. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. It's not that bad. Well, for you actual pilots out there that fly regularly, I'm sure. Yeah, for me, I would be terrified. I would just be very, very nervous. But I mean, I know that's why you fly with an instructor forever. Yeah, getting caught up with chat, doing all the extra stuff. Yeah, I mean, this flight, I didn't spend any time like outside of looking at where we're going. I didn't even look at the runway numbers, you know. I did look at the runway length and the elevation, but yeah, I definitely didn't spend the time learning about where I was going. But yeah, that was crazy. And during sunset or right as it turns night, that's a little, that's another factor as well. So that was cool. Whew. All right, I think that's gonna do it for me. I know it's only one flight, but yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot for me. Sorry, isn't that subdued right there? Sorry, dude. I think you were waiting here to fly another leg, but I am pooped after that flight. So I think it's, yeah, I think I'm going to call it. That's what do we do? 2.5 hours? Yeah, that was one flight that took from, I mean, I started the stream 2.5 hours ago, so that was just a long flight, but yeah, I'm going to be working on a more concise tutorial with all this stuff that we use today. I definitely like doing the stream and chatting about it, and I'm learning at the same time as you guys. Like, I don't really use the G1000 for VORs, so I've been trying to refresh my memory on that, and I don't know that I like it that much, honestly. I think with VORs, like, I prefer the big CDI, you know, I prefer the steam gauge instruments and stuff. This is very everything in the G1000 is really subtle, like the to from flag, and you know, at least in the sim. So I find it even more challenging using this for VOR nav than I do like the 172 without the G1000 or the 152. But anyway, good stuff. Yeah, thanks for flying along. That was great. Sorry that I did sim acceleration and all that, changed course so many times, but obviously you just kept along. Nice landing. I think you had an easier time than I did. So yeah, that was fun. Thanks for joining. And sorry if you guys couldn't join along. I know it's pretty short and I haven't been on in a few weeks, but getting back into it, and I will, oh, I also don't know when the next G1000 NXi version is going to come out. So it could be another couple of weeks. If it is, then I'll have to make a video or two in the meantime. I do want to do one like this with G1000 NXi doing an ILS approach, kind of like the RNAV video. and then do another one with VORs like this. But it looks like I have some more learning to do as well. So yeah, it was great. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Merlin, thanks for hanging out. LA kids, thanks for hanging out. Les, thanks for the chat. I'm going to do more VOR learning off stream. Merlin, good to see you as usual. Chris, thanks for hanging out. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Have a good rest of your day or night, wherever you are. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.